Hey everyone, welcome back to the Wrenchin' Fool. So today we're back in the shop working on my 2004 Mazda 6. If you've watched any of the previous videos on this, or if you haven't watched any of the previous videos on this, I would suggest going back and looking at least the inspection video, because we're going to be doing sort of a follow-up with that inspection video and getting started on some of these repairs. So in this video, we're going to be taking care of the front brakes, the most critical safety demerit that we saw in the car during the inspection, with that left front brake being replaced with a rear brake rotor. So we're going to take care of that today in this video. Let's get started. Now those of you who watched the previous video and during the inspection of this Mazda 6 will remember that I said that there was a little bit of a surprise for the brakes when it came time to do that. Well, surprise! So, Mazda fans out there may already recognize this brand name, Corksport. But this is going to be a surprise to me too. I haven't opened this box yet. Let's take it out and see what's inside. Got the most dangerous tool in the shop here. Bet you didn't know you're getting an unboxing video too. Put that down before I chop my hand off. Ooh. We've got some instructions. Put those right in the garbage where they belong. Got some paper. A little bit more paper. We've got some brake lines, and it looks like some more instructions to throw away. I'm kidding, by the way. Don't ever throw away your instructions, at least until you're done. Got a heavy box of something. It says Corksport. Same size box, so that half the weight that says Corksport. Oop. Another heavy box. An identical heavy box. Oh, a really heavy box. Foam, paper, and another heavy box. Oops. Let's get this one out of the way. I'm going to open the box that I think is going to be the most exciting first. Wow. Oh, look at that. You would if you could, right? Ta-da! Can you see that? Hopefully you can. That's cool. All right, I'm going to put that back away for just a second. Maybe. So I should explain as I go to open the second most exciting box what exactly this is. So this is a big brake kit. It's designed specifically for an 06 to whenever they stopped making them Mazda Speed 6. Ooh. Look at that. It's bigger than my head. I can see right through it. Nice and vented. It's a two-piece rotor. So let me finish my thought. This is a big brake kit for a 2006 to 08, I think is when they stopped making them, 08 or 09 Mazda Speed 6. Now that's a different car from this, but it's the exact same chassis. And as far as the front brakes are concerned, well, they're the same. Very little changed on the front end of that car aside from the engine. So this kit, although it's designed for a Mazda Speed 6, which has a lot more power than this, it bolts right on. So call it overcompensating maybe for the fact that the brakes that are on there right now are dangerous, But this is going to work better for my end goal for this particular car, which is going to see some track days. It's probably not going to have a substantial amount more power than what it has right now, but it is going to get driven hard. So brakes like this are going to help. I can't wait. Let's get them on the car. So, step 1, jack up your car. Done. Step 2, let's get the wheel off of there. So since we're going to be taking these brake calipers off of here, I'm going to go ahead and crack loose the screw that holds the brake line on there first. But before I do that, I'm going to get some pinch pliers just to pinch off the hose so we don't lose all of our brake fluid. So in case you've never heard of that, that's what these pinch pliers are for. I use them to pinch hoses. Don't use it on any sort of plastic hose, but on a brake hose it's okay. So I'll just get in the way and put it up there, so I can crack this bolt loose on the back. Turn that a little bit. I'm going to see if I can get the wheel to stay a little bit more that way so that I can get better access to these brake parts. Ugh. The problem is that the design of this suspension, it makes it so that it wants to twist the wheel back. It wants to stay centered. So I'll take that off. All right, so there's our banjo bolt that holds the brake line onto the brake caliper. We're now draining all of our brake fluid out of that caliper. And so on the back side of this caliper, there's a little cover that covers one of the bolts here. I'm just going to take that cover off. It just sort of clips in there. We can take that off. Behind that, there's an 8mm Allen head, or hex head, whatever you want to call it. I'll take that out as well. If I can get my wrench up in here. My wrench. There we go. Just give it a little crack loose. That was tight. All right, so we got that loose. The other side, there's no bolt holding it on. There's just a pin that it can pivot on. So I'm going to move this a little bit. See if I can get that bolt out of there. It's kind of hanging up on there a little bit. Wow, that pin is not wanting to move. Give it some persuasion. Whoever did the brakes on this car last time did a fine job. And by fine, I mean not fine. There we go. So we were getting stuck on that bolt. If you can't see it, I don't know if you can see it or not. Subscribe to my channel so I can afford some proper lighting. All right, there's our caliper off. Drain some of that fluid out. So this caliper bracket is held on with a couple of 17mm head nuts, or bolts I should say. So just get those taken out and then the whole bracket should come right off. There's one. Make sure you get them both loose before you take them all the way out. Otherwise you might end up smacking yourself in the face with the caliper bracket. So there's our caliper bracket. Take that off. And there's the two 17mm head bolts that hold that caliper bracket on. Set those over here. And then we've got a couple of screws here that are only there just to hold the brake rotor on. So I'm going to go grab a tool to get those off. So this tool is called an impact screwdriver. Basically you've got a little screwdriver bit here on the end. What you do is you stick it into a screw like that and then hit the end of it with a hammer. And when you hit it with the hammer, it twists to remove that screw. Sort of works like an impact, like an air tool or an electric impact tool. This is a manual one. Close your eyes and plug your ears. So there's that first one loose. There's the second one loose. This is a good way to take these types of screws out without having as much risk of stripping out the screw head as they tend to do. Just grab a regular screwdriver, take these screws out the rest of the way. It's not totally necessary to hold on to these or to put them back in because the brake rotor is held onto the car by the wheel once you bolt the wheel on there. But these are kind of nice. It just makes it so the rotor stays in place. Now you see them right there. It makes it so the rotor stays in place when you take the wheel and the caliper and everything off. So, oh, that just came right off. Perfect. So just really quick before we put these new parts on the car, let's do a comparison of the new parts versus the old. So let's start over here at the calipers. Probably one of the most noticeable differences here. So on the bottom we've got the stock caliper. It's a single piston, you can see it in there. Fairly small brake pads. There's nothing really special about it. It's sort of an old design. Slides on these sliders over here, which tend to get gummed up and make it so that the brakes don't slide as easily as they should, so you get kind of uneven braking force. Plus, the way that this caliper works is that all of the input comes from this side. And what it does is it pushes this pad against the brake rotor, and then equal and opposite reaction means that when it pushes out that way and hits something that stops it, it starts pushing back on this side that way. So it squeezes the pads together that way. But it all sort of relies on no friction and this and that and the other. And needless to say, this is not the best way to do brakes. It ends up with uneven wear, uneven braking force. Now up here, with this style, this is what's called a fixed caliper. This one's a floating caliper or a sliding caliper. This one's a fixed caliper. The difference is that this one is designed to slide back and forth on these pins over here, whereas this one is designed to just stay put, and the only thing that moves is on the inside, which we'll take a look at here. Now, it's still got the packing and everything in there, so you'll have to imagine this a little bit, but behind these brake pads, there's 4 pistons. You can kind of see the little humps right here. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4. And what happens is those pistons move in and out within the caliper. And when those pistons move, they push directly on these brake pads. So you have even pressure all the way through the system, even force. Just a simpler design overall. There's less friction. These are internally lubricated by the brake fluid, so they slide easier. It's just a better design. The other thing that I can't really show on camera is that this, despite being substantially larger, is also substantially lighter than that, because that's aluminum, that's iron. Let's go over here and take a look at the brake rotors, and you can already see just at first glance that there's quite a difference. This is a stock brake rotor. This is the correct brake rotor of what should be on the front of a 2004 Mazda 6. We'll just sort of gloss over the fact that the driver's side had the wrong one. This is all solid iron. Depending on where you buy the brake rotor from, it might not have, very high carbon content. Cheaper brake rotors have low carbon content, and therefore they don't handle the heat as well. On this Mazda 6 and on most modern cars, they're vented, so you've got 2 separate friction surfaces there with a vent in between. This works fine for a stock car. Obviously, it's designed to meet certain safety standards, and it does just fine. But let's compare it to the aftermarket one here, the big brake kit. First of all, there's a substantial difference in size, and I'll try to show that to you here. Line that up the best I can. Yeah, that's pretty even all the way around. So we have a 3/4 of an inch or so difference in radius. We have a 3/4 inch difference in radius, which means we probably have 1.5 inches in diameter, which I think that adds up to be about right. I'm pretty sure the stock brake rotor is somewhere around 11.5 inches. This aftermarket one is 13 inches. The other thing, again, that I can't show on TV or on camera, this is a lot lighter, despite the fact that it's bigger. Part of that is down to what this metal is made of. Again, it's going to be higher carbon steel, but also this whole center section here around where it bolts, this is all aluminum. This is removable. This is called a 2-piece brake rotor. So it makes this part a lot lighter. These two parts, just better all the way around. So let's get these on the car. And because Corksport designs this brake kit specifically for this generation of Mazda 6, even if it's not, I should say, this generation of Mazda Speed 6, even though this is not a Mazda Speed 6, this whole setup is pretty much exactly the same. So they know these cars pretty well, and what they were nice enough to tell me and tell all of their customers buying this kit is that this big brake kit will not fit with the stock wheels. There's not enough of a gap between the brake caliper and the face of the wheel. It's fine diameter-wise with the stock wheels. They're 18 inches. The wheels that I've got are 18 inches, but it will not clear the brake caliper face on the wheel. So what we're going to do first is we need to put some wheel spacers in here. I've got 12 millimeter wheel spacers we need to put on, but in order to do that, I need to do longer wheel studs. So first things first, we'll take these out and then we'll get the new wheel studs put in. So in order to get these studs out, it's actually pretty simple. They're just pressed in there. There's nothing that's actually holding them in there other than the friction between the hub itself and the part that goes through the hub. So all you have to do to get these out is just basically hit them on the front side here and they'll pop out the back. Now, I'll show you a little picture of this because it's hard to see on camera, but there's a little, this heat shield here that goes around the back side here, and it just keeps you from getting the studs out of there. But there is one quick solution to this. It's as easy as 1, 2, 3. So now we've got plenty of space there. There's really no reason for that little shield to bend out the way it did, so all I did was bend it back, so now it's flat against the spindle here. So now all I have to do is tap each of these out of here. So I'm going to explain and show how to do one of these first, removal and installation, then we'll speed through the rest of them because it's just the same thing over again. Alright, so we got the big air hammer out here, so plug your eyes and close your ears again. That one came out with gusto. Alright, so these are the longer wheel studs I've got. I'll post up a picture and a part number of these. If you have a Mazda 6 and you're going to do the same thing, these fit perfectly. I think their application is for a Hummer H3 or something, which is kind of funny, but as you can see, if I compare them side by side, you can see how it's roughly half an inch longer, about 10 millimeters or something like that longer, which is going to work perfectly with our wheel studs. Now there's a really easy way to get these new wheel studs in there. Again, they're just pressed in, so all you have to do is press it in. Now you can't, I suppose you could try to get back here and try to press it in from the back side, but it's a lot easier to just use one of the basic machines here and use some mechanical advantage to your benefit. So I've got this little tool here. All it is just basically a bearing. And what it allows you to do, you stick it on there. I've got a little washer on there too. And then you take a lug nut and screw it on there. And now you've got a bearing between your hub and the lug nut. So all you have to do now is tighten down this lug nut and it'll pull that new stud right in. You could do it with a wrench too, but I'm going to use an electric impact just because I have it. Okay, there we go. That's installed. Now we just take the tool back off. And we're golden. We've got a new lug stud on there. Now it's repeat 4 more times for all these other ones. I'm just going to speed through that because you don't need to see all of it. Got all of our new wheel studs installed. So I'm going to just clean that up really quick, make sure we get all the rust off of that hub. Of course, if you're smarter than me, you would do this when all the wheel studs are out, because then it's way easier. Alright, I'm going to put a really thin layer of anti-seize lubricant on the face of the hub there, right where it goes around the rotor, to make it a little easier for the next guy. This will make it so that the rotor comes a little bit easier, comes off a little bit easier. Important to help out the next guy, because in this case the next guy is almost certainly me. You don't want to put too much on here because you don't want it to be slinging around and end up getting on your brakes, because lubricant plus brake pads or brake rotors is not ideal. Okay, I've got my gloves on now, since we're dealing with new brake parts, and I want to make sure they stay clean. Now, something I did do off camera to this brake rotor, and you should do with every brake rotor, is with a totally clean rag, preferably like a shop towel, like one of those blue shop towels or something that absolutely has no grease on it. Use some brake cleaner to make sure you clean off the face of this, because this is where your brake pads touch. You don't want any oil, any contamination on there. The other thing with this particular brake kit is that the rotors are directional. So you got to make sure that you grab the correct rotor for the correct side. I double checked that. It's all in the instructions. They walk you through it, so I'm not going to go through it again. But this is definitely the correct one. So we'll slide that on there. Before I slide it on there, I'm going to make sure I slide it in the right spot, because I was just about to not. If it has these holes for those screws, you got to make sure they line up. So we'll make sure that they line up like that. Your beauty. So the reason I like those screws, if they are there, is that you can use them to hold the rotor on there while you're putting everything else together. Just like that. There. Now that rotor is solidly attached. I don't have to worry about trying to fall off the whole time I'm working on the brakes. So we went slightly out of sequence with the brake steps here, the installation instructions versus what Corksport recommends. So these are almost certainly going to fall off, explode, and kill everybody on the planet now. But what they recommend doing before putting the rotor on is to put the caliper mounting bracket on, which I probably should have done, because then you could actually see it, but whatever, YOLO. So we're going to do it this way instead. Now, one thing that they did recommend that you absolutely should do, I'm going to say it again, you absolutely should do, is put some blue Loctite on the bolts. Now, people always overuse Loctite. It takes about that much. This is going to be out of focus, but it takes about that much. All that's on there is just a couple of drops right on the very edge of the threads. That's all you need. People always put way too much on. So, we've got our caliper bracket here. The way that you're supposed to put it on is like this. So, this part on the top where it's notched goes up. The flat side goes towards the rotor. And then you bolt this in where the stock caliper bracket goes. I'll screw these in by hand, and they give torque specifications for all of these mounting bolts. Again, with brakes, you don't want to mess around, just do it right. So we're going to use the torque wrench. If you don't have a torque wrench, you should probably get one. You don't have to use an electric one like this, the snap-on one, but at least get one of the cheaper ones from Harbor Freight. That's better than nothing. Or if you work on cars regularly, get yourself a nice one. But the specification that they give is 64 to 71 foot-pounds. So we'll go ahead and get these torqued down. Good one. There's the other one. There. Now with Loctite on there, torque to proper specification, you don't have to worry about them falling off. Because nobody wants their brake caliper falling off. So this caliper comes shipped with some packing material in here. That's just there to keep the brake pads spread apart. So obviously before we stuff it on the car, we got to take that out. Now, in the kit here, they give you two longer Allen head bolts, which I've got down here in this box, which you can't see. And again with these, you want to put Loctite on them, because you don't want these coming off. Now the curious thing is in this kit In the instructions, they tell you to use blue Loctite, which I just happen to have, and I'm going to put it on here. But in the kit, they give you a little vial of red Loctite. Now, the difference between that is blue Loctite is meant to be removable. It holds the bolts in there and it sort of makes them harder to remove, I guess, but they're still removable. It just takes a little bit more torque to take them out. Red Loctite, generally, if you're going just by the color, is designed to not be removed again. Usually with red Loctite, it requires heat to remove them. So it's kind of curious that they do that. So anyway, we'll put these bolts in there, get the caliper torque down. Now, as you're putting this caliper on here and tightening it down, just kind of get an idea of how the brake pads are centered over the rotor. Not only do you want to make sure that their coverage is good over this section of the rotor, but you want to make sure that the caliper itself, this way, is reasonably centered over the top of the rotor. Now this one, it looks perfect. It doesn't look like there's any adjustment needed at all. But in the kit, it comes with these little shims. There's a whole bunch of them in there. They're just really, really thin. They look like really thin washers. What these shims are there for, which you can't even barely see them, but you'll have to take my word for it. They're in my hand. What those are for is if you need to do any adjustment on this brake caliper, you can use those shims to do it. Like if it's not centered this way, you can put shims behind the bracket that we bolted on in the backside, and it will move the bracket forward or backward. If the caliper is not sitting properly on top of the brake rotor, not like this way, you can use those shims between the caliper and that bracket, I believe. Don't absolutely quote me on that, but I believe you can. In the Corksport instructions, they don't mention anything about it, and like I said, this doesn't need any shims. It fits perfectly. So I'm going to keep tightening this down, but I figured I'd mention that, especially since they are in the kit. Apparently whoever, I don't suspect that Corksport actually manufactures this kit. Maybe they do, but I kind of doubt it. It's more like they've designed it. But anyway, whoever manufactures the kit looks like they shipped those shims just in case you need them. So torque specification for this bolt, these bolts, is the same as the other two, 64 to 71 foot-pounds. So we get those torqued down. There we go. Perfect. And let's just take a moment to appreciate that. Doesn't that look better than the old setup? I think so. Okay, appreciation time over. Now we got to install the brake line. So we've still got our old rubber brake line back here. Back here. See it? Back there? No, you can't even see it. So the kit comes with new braided stainless steel lines that are going to fit better with this caliper. Here's our braided stainless brake line to replace our rubber one. Nice upgrade. Even if you're not doing performance brakes, this is a good upgrade. Definitely helps the pedal feel. So our new braided stainless brake line there also comes with some new hardware to attach it to the brake caliper. I don't even know if you can see that. That's all blurry. Never mind. I'm just going to install it. But it's got a banjo bolt here and a couple of copper crush washers, just the same as the factory setup. The instructions go over this all pretty well. So I'm just going to get this started on there. The instructions tell you not to tighten anything down until it's all installed, which is generally a good rule of thumb for any aftermarket parts that you're installing, because they never quite fit exactly perfectly. So get that screwed in there. Okay. And I need to sort of get the old brake line out of the way. So I'm going to grab my 12mm socket and impact here, and there's a bracket right up here on the shock absorber that holds that brake line on there. So I'm going to take that off. We've got to save the bolt because we'll be reusing it. So I'll set it off here to the side. I'll move my light since I have to work here. So I've got that loose there. Now, the instructions will tell you, run the hose around the back side of the shock absorber, and then there's a little plastic, again, I don't know if you can see that, but there's a little plastic piece up here, and that's where you clamp the brake hose to the shock absorber back here. And they give you these little brackets here to put the brake line onto the existing shock absorber in its stock location. Now, the difficulty that I'm having with this is simply that this doesn't have the factory shocks on it anymore. It has aftermarket TN coilovers, as we discussed in a previous video, which fit the car perfectly. And they have a bracket there to mount the factory brake line. But because of the difference in this little plastic section here is not long enough to fit through this bracket and that bracket. So I have to do it a little bit of a different way. You're probably not going to have this issue if you're installing this brake kit on your car, so I'm not going to go through all the details of how I'm putting this together. Okay, so I've got that brake hose installed on there, on that bracket on the shock, nice and secure. Now we get to the second part that doesn't fit. Basically, the only thing on this car that's not fitting with this kit is the brake hoses. And I think that's just because, I mean, obviously these are not Mazda Speed 6 brakes. These are, what was on there is not. And beyond that, there was a changeover from what I can tell in 2006, even for the regular Mazda 6, where they changed the brake system completely. Part of the reason why I got this is because the older Mazda 6s, it's really difficult to find brakes for them. So the part where it mounts, the hose itself fits fine, but the part where it mounts the hose to the car, just to hold it in place, not hydraulically, but just to hold it in place so it doesn't vibrate, that doesn't fit on this aftermarket line either. So I'm going to do a little bit of black magic to make that fit. It'll be nice and safe. So, and again, it's not going to apply to you, so don't worry about it. Okay, just to give you a quick idea of the couple of fitment issues on the brake line here. Again, everything else on the kit fit perfectly except for the brake lines, and that's not the fault of the kit. I'm sure these fit perfectly on a Mazda Speed 6 or even an 06 and newer Mazda 6, but because this is old and has a different brake system and aftermarket coilovers and stuff, it is what it is. So the aftermarket coil fitment issue is right here. Just basically the thickness of this bracket and the thickness of this bracket means that this part where the brake line clamps to the bracket doesn't fit properly. So I just space that out a little bit so that it all fits and it's nice and tight and everything. That's all good. Moving over to the other side here, where it attaches to the hydraulic line. Again, the hydraulic part fits perfectly. The part that doesn't fit is they have another one of these little brackets that they want you to use. But the way that this has to fit on here is that bracket has to be able to go this way. Well, looking at this, there's no place to bolt that where the bracket fits this way. Apparently on the 06 and newer and the Mazda Speed 6s and everything, there's a separate bracket over here that allows you to bolt this down like that, but that doesn't exist on this car. So what I did is I just, again, sorry about the shaking, I just wrapped the fitting here with some rubber hose just to keep it from rubbing against the frame and that bracket there. And then I zip tied it in place. It's not ideal, but this is not something that's structural. All it's there for is to keep the brake line from vibrating around and fatiguing the metal line. And I mean, this is nice and solid now. It's not moving at all. So it's doing the same job, even if it's a bit janky. But when you're working with a car that's odd and using parts that are not specifically designed for this car, sometimes you just have to do what you got to do. Okay, next step, we've got to make sure that our wheel clears the caliper. Now, as I mentioned before, Corksport is nice enough and they have enough expertise to know that if you're using a stock style wheel, it's not going to clear this brake caliper. And the part that it doesn't clear is this front face here. The spokes of the wheel are going to hit this front face. So in order to alleviate that, we've got these wheel spacers. Now this is a 12mm spacer, and it's specifically designed for this bolt pattern and this hub diameter. So when you put it on there, it fits on there perfectly. There's other options for wheel spacers, but Some of them are just literally flat pieces of metal that just sort of fit on there in some way and space your wheel out, but they don't offer this sort of centering. This is where your wheel centers onto the hub. So you need to not only have that on your spacer, but you need to have something that it matches it on the backside to fit onto the hub so that everything when you put it on is perfectly centered. Now before I slide this on there, I'm just going to put a little bit anti-seize on this inner part here because, again, making it easy for the next guy because the next guy is probably me. Okay, I've got just a little bit of anti-seize, like a really thin layer smeared in there, but don't want to put too much again because lubricant plus brakes equals bad news. But you see how nice that fits on there? It doesn't rattle around. It moves a little bit this way, but it's perfectly centered on the hub. It doesn't move up and down that way. And we've got this ring on here, the hub-centric ring, so that our stock wheel is going to fit on there perfectly centered. So that's the last step. Well, technically the last step is bleeding the brakes, but we're going to forego that step for now because we've still got to do the back of the car. All right, well there it is, all finished up, sitting back on the ground on all four wheels. Wheels haven't even fallen off yet, so those Dorman wheel studs and the wheel spacers must be better than the internet make them out to be, or at least a little less sketchy. The Corksport brake kit fit perfectly. Like I said, aside from those brake lines, which to be fair, they're not designed for this car. They're designed for a 2006 and newer Mazda Speed 6, not a 2004 Mazda 6. So the fact that the brake rotors and calipers and everything, pads all fit perfectly, that's pretty cool. This is going to be a great upgrade for this car. It's probably a bit overkill for this car, honestly, but the biggest reason I ended up getting these is because I couldn't find brake rotors or brake pads for a 2004 Mazda 6 in a brand that I liked. The best that I could find is basically stock replacement stuff, and even then the brands weren't that great, and a lot of it was special order that was a week or more away. So I figured these are all reasonably easy to get parts. The brake pads are super common parts, very easy to get. The rotors are pretty easy to get. The calipers, nothing should go wrong with those. But Corksport's been around for darn near 30 years now, so I'm pretty confident they're going to be able to replace that if needed. But really happy with it overall. I won't be able to get out and drive it today, unfortunately, because the shop's backed up, and I've been here at the shop for almost 16 hours now, so I need to go home and go to bed probably. You need to go down to the comment section there, chop the like button if you like this video. If you had any questions or anything about this kit, about this car, about anything, or you want to tell me how stupid I am for putting 4-piston brake calipers and 13-inch rotors on a 2004 Mazda 6, definitely do so down in the comment section below. Otherwise, if you want to see what I've got in store for the rear brakes on this car, or anything else I'm doing to this car, be sure to click that subscribe button, click the bell icon if you want to be notified when I put up a new video. Otherwise, I think that's it for this video. Thanks for watching.